Jeffrey Epstein's name may be the one that dominates headlines, but buried in his so-called birthday book were names like princes, presidents, billionaires, and Hollywood stars, an unsettling roll call of power that turned what looked like an innocent calendar into one of the creepiest ledgers ever uncovered. When investigators entered Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion, they were overwhelmed by the unsettling mix of wealth and secrecy that filled every corner. The house itself felt less like a home and more like a vault for disturbing treasures. Expensive art hung on the walls, some pieces provocative and out of place, while security cameras seemed to follow every step. Among the piles of documents, photographs, and records stacked in locked cabinets, there was a discovery that appeared strangely ordinary at first glance. A small, leather-bound notebook tucked away inside a drawer of an antique desk. It was unmarked on the outside except for faint scratches that looked more like age than intention. When opened, it revealed a careful list of names, each paired with a date. On the cover page, in faded ink, one phrase stood out: birthday book. At first it seemed harmless, the kind of address book that belonged to someone who liked to remember important occasions. But investigators had learned that nothing inside Epstein's properties was simple. His wealth and influence had been used to weave a network that extended across continents, and the book quickly revealed signs of being far more than a polite reminder system. Every page was arranged by month and day, yet scattered throughout were unusual marks and annotations. Some names were underlined in heavy black pen, others circled with small arrows pointing toward the margins. Several entries had cryptic symbols beside them: stars, crosses, triangles, without any explanation. The unsettling detail was that many of the names were instantly recognizable. Politicians, business magnates, film producers, and even royalty appeared in neat handwriting. Their birthdays were written down with a precision that suggested careful planning rather than casual memory. Epstein had surrounded himself with powerful individuals, but this notebook revealed a deliberate system of keeping track of them. Every name was a doorway to a world of influence, and every symbol hinted at deeper meaning. To the investigators holding it, the birthday book did not feel like a calendar. It felt like a code. The more they turned the pages, the stranger it became. Some entries contained no names at all, only dates with long sequences of numbers or single words like flight and dinner. Others had red ink scrawled beside them, the kind of detail that seemed to shout importance. The fact that these notes were written in Epstein's own hand gave them weight. He had not hired an assistant to make these records. He had done it himself, page by page, as though guarding secrets he didn't trust anyone else to hold. The presence of this book raised disturbing questions. Why were certain birthdays emphasized when others were not? What did the codes mean? Were these entries tied to meetings, to social gatherings, or to something much darker? Investigators quickly realized they were holding a map, one that charted the connections Epstein maintained and perhaps the leverage he used over others. What appeared, at first, to be a harmless keepsake was in fact a chilling artifact, a silent witness to the hidden structure of Epstein's empire. It was not just a ledger of birthdays, it was the first step into a labyrinth of secrets. As investigators dug deeper into the birthday book, they began to notice a striking pattern hidden beneath the surface. Names weren't scattered randomly throughout the pages. They were arranged in clusters, and these clusters seemed to orbit around certain powerful events. When researchers cross-referenced the dates with records of political summits, charity galas, international conferences, and exclusive fundraisers, the connections became unnervingly clear. Many of the highlighted birthdays coincided with occasions when the world's most influential figures gathered in one place. The book was functioning not simply as a reminder of celebrations, but as a key to access points in high society. Epstein had created a tool to track who would be available, where they would be, and when the door to opportunity was wide open. Some names had small stars inked next to them, others were marked with arrows pointing toward additional notes in the margins. Those notes often included vague but suggestive terms such as arrival, island, or flight. Taken together, they suggested that a birthday wasn't just a day of cake and candles. It was a carefully chosen moment for networking, persuasion, and sometimes recruitment. A celebrity's birthday could serve as the perfect backdrop to meet financiers. A politician's celebration might offer a quiet chance to secure favors or gather leverage. The simplicity of the system was chilling. Each person was more than a friend or contact. They were an entry in a living database of opportunity. Even more troubling was how the clusters often corresponded with Epstein's known travel logs. The infamous private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express, frequently took flight during the very periods when these marked birthdays occurred. Logs of trips to the island in the Caribbean or the ranch in New Mexico lined up almost perfectly with the symbols in the notebook. Investigators began to suspect that the birthday book was not just for scheduling, but also for synchronizing travel and ensuring the right mix of guests appeared in the right places. The coincidences were too precise to dismiss. One unsettling realization came when they noticed that many of the individuals grouped together had little in common publicly. A wealthy banker, a Hollywood director, and a foreign prince might all share nothing except for the fact that their birthdays were marked on the same page with identical symbols. Why would such diverse figures be bound together in this ledger? The possibility emerged that Epstein used these overlaps as a way of binding powerful people into secret gatherings where their paths would never otherwise cross. By celebrating birthdays, he was engineering collisions of influence, crafting webs of connection that benefited only him. The longer the analysis continued, the clearer it became that the birthday book was not sentimental at all. It was transactional. It was a tool of manipulation dressed as an organizer. Each page served as a doorway into a world of control, where celebrations became traps, and friendships were carefully constructed layers of obligation. For those trying to unravel the mystery, it was impossible to escape the sense that they were staring at the blueprint of Epstein's access to power, a chilling reminder that behind every party was a calculated purpose. The deeper investigators ventured into the birthday book, the more disturbing the discoveries became. Among the neatly written names of billionaires, celebrities, and politicians, there existed entire sections that defied explanation. These were the ghost names, entries that didn't correspond to anyone known in public records, social circles, or even within Epstein's extensive contacts. Some were written with only first names like Lily, Marco, or Swan. Others had no name at all, only vague descriptions paired with dates. Next to one date appeared the word keeper. Another carried the word song. Some had digits that resembled international dialing codes, while others looked like account numbers hastily scribbled down. These ghostly entries carried no context, yet they felt deliberate, as if they were meant to conceal rather than reveal. What unsettled investigators further was the realization that several of these mysterious names aligned with unsolved cases of missing individuals. While the connections were not officially confirmed, some entries fell hauntingly close to the last known dates when young women vanished from major cities. A first name in the book matched one such missing person from Europe, whose disappearance had long remained unexplained. The coincidence raised the terrifying possibility that these pages might not simply reflect social contacts, but could also be coded references to victims or individuals kept hidden in Epstein's shadowy network. The book's oddities didn't stop there. Scattered among the ghost names were notations that resembled instructions. On one page, a date was followed by Garden 2 a.m. Another page simply had South Room written in tight, controlled script. No context was given, but investigators speculated these were reminders of private meetings or secret locations. Some of the ghost names even had symbols beside them, small triangles, double circles, or a series of dashes. The meaning of these symbols has never been deciphered, but their presence suggested an internal code known only to Epstein and perhaps a few trusted associates. What made these entries especially eerie was how isolated they were. While most famous names in the birthday book were grouped together in clusters, the ghost names often stood alone on their pages, separated from the rest. It was as if they belonged to a different category altogether, something deliberately hidden beneath layers of normalcy. Analysts who studied the book described these pages as the dark spine of the ledger, suggesting that they contained information too sensitive to connect openly with the rest of Epstein's web. The ambiguity of these ghost names made them the most unsettling part of the entire discovery. If they were aliases, they concealed the identities of individuals too dangerous to reveal. If they were victims, they hinted at crimes far more widespread than previously believed. And if they were code for financial transactions, they may have mapped the flow of hidden resources that kept Epstein's empire alive. Whatever their true meaning, the ghost names turned the birthday book from a suspicious artifact into something resembling a hidden language of exploitation and secrecy. Each page seemed less like a diary of dates and more like a ciphered record of lives bound to Epstein in ways still unknown. As investigators examined the birthday book more closely, they began to notice that certain dates repeated with unsettling precision. While many entries were simple reminders of when influential people celebrated their birthdays, a few dates stood out for being overloaded with names, symbols, and annotations year after year. At first, these clusters seemed random, but deeper analysis revealed that many of the recurring dates lined up with ancient festivals, solstice markers, and occult traditions that had been whispered about for centuries. This discovery introduced a chilling new layer of meaning. The book might not just track birthdays, but could also be tied to ritualistic gatherings and secret ceremonies hidden beneath the guise of social events. One of the most striking examples was April 30th. Known historically as Walpurgis Night, this date has long been associated with fire festivals and occult celebrations in parts of Europe. In Epstein's birthday book, the page for April 30th was crowded with 3 powerful names, all highlighted with strange triangular symbols beside them. Investigators noted that Epstein's travel records placed him at private gatherings during this time in multiple years, often involving groups of wealthy and influential individuals. While no direct evidence linked these trips to ritual practices, the symbolic connection could not be ignored. Another date that stood out was August 8th, marked in bold handwriting across several years. August 8th holds significance in certain esoteric traditions, symbolizing cycles of power and renewal. In the book, this date was filled with highlighted names, some underlined twice, as if they held extraordinary importance. Several entries for August 8th also carried annotations such as "Arrival confirmed" or "Flight early." Once again, investigators traced Epstein's movements and discovered that these dates coincided with visits to his island estate, where secrecy and exclusivity were at their highest. Patterns like these appeared again and again. October 31st, traditionally tied to the thinning of boundaries between worlds in folklore, carried 2 ghost names paired with circles. June 21st, the summer solstice, had an unusual sketch of an arrow pointing upward with a list of attendees that looked more like a roster than a reminder. Taken together, these pages suggested deliberate choices that went far beyond casual record-keeping. The possibility that Epstein and his network were orchestrating ritualized events disturbed even hardened investigators. It raised the question of whether his infamous parties were more than indulgent gatherings of the elite. Were these social occasions layered with hidden meaning, designed not only to entertain, but also to bind individuals through shared secrecy and ritual? The thought was almost too dark to entertain, yet the birthday book seemed to hint at exactly that. Whether symbolic or literal, the recurrence of these dates painted a portrait of control disguised as tradition. By aligning gatherings with ancient festivals, Epstein may have created a sense of mystique and exclusivity that deepened the loyalty of those involved. For investigators, these patterns were impossible to dismiss as coincidence. The birthday book was no longer just a ledger of names and dates. It was beginning to look like a blueprint for orchestrated rituals hidden in plain sight. What haunted investigators most about the birthday book were not the names that appeared, but the pages that were missing. Between several months, whole sheets had been carefully torn out, leaving only the faint ridges where ink had once pressed against the paper. These gaps created an eerie silence in a book that otherwise overflowed with information. Handwriting experts confirmed that the missing entries weren't the result of carelessness or decay. They had been removed intentionally, with precision, as if someone wanted to erase particular details forever. The absence of these pages was more disturbing than any of the coded names or strange symbols that survived, because it suggested deliberate concealment of the most dangerous secrets. When the remaining entries were compared with flight logs, financial records, and seized photographs, the missing sections stood out like holes in a puzzle. Many of the torn pages would have corresponded with years when Epstein's activities were most scrutinized, including the first time he was investigated in the mid-2000s. This timing raised suspicions that the removals were not random, but strategic. Whoever had access to the book seemed to know exactly which information could not afford to be discovered. These missing pages might have contained names of individuals who had since risen to untouchable levels of influence or evidence that directly connected Epstein to events that have never been explained. Even more chilling was the discovery that faint impressions of writing still lingered on some of the stubs. Forensic techniques revealed fragments of letters and numbers pressed into the paper beneath, like shadows of what had once been written. Investigators were able to make out partial words, snippets such as fund, house, and gate. These fragments were too incomplete to form a clear picture, yet they hinted at financial arrangements and possible meeting locations. The glimpses of what had been destroyed only deepened the mystery, suggesting that entire networks of connections had been stripped from the book before it was found. The missing pages also fueled speculation about whether Epstein worked alone in maintaining the ledger. The consistency of the handwriting throughout the surviving sections pointed to his personal involvement, but the removal of entries suggested outside interference, perhaps by someone with equal interest in erasing traces. It remained uncertain whether Epstein himself destroyed the pages, or whether another figure, possibly after his arrest, took the opportunity to cleanse the record of dangerous names. Either way, the act of tearing out those sections transformed the birthday book from an unsettling artifact into an incomplete confession. What the investigators were left with was a chilling realization. The most damning evidence may never be recovered. The blank spaces spoke louder than the filled ones, hinting at secrets too explosive to survive on paper. The missing pages were more than an absence. They were a warning that Epstein's influence and network reached further than anyone wanted to admit. The birthday book, in its incomplete form, was both a map of power and a monument to what had been successfully hidden. Its silence was the loudest secret of all.